November 9th, 1989. A crisp, electric evening in Berlin, Germany. The city is a scar of concrete and barbed wire, sliced in two by a wall that has stood for 28 years. On the western side, neon lights and bustling streets hum with freedom. On the eastern side, gray tenements and guarded checkpoints choke under the weight of a communist regime. Tonight, at a press conference in East Berlin, a tired official named Günter Schabowski fumbles through papers, unaware he's about to ignite a revolution. He mutters words that will echo through history. The East German government, desperate and crumbling, will allow its citizens to cross the border. The room erupts. Reporters scramble. Within hours, thousands of East Berliners flood toward the wall, their faces lit with disbelief and defiance. Border guards, caught off guard, hesitate. By midnight, the impossible happens. The Berlin Wall, symbol of a divided world, begins to crack. This is no ordinary night. It's a moment that will topple an empire, reunite a city, and reshape the globe. Welcome to Vestige Files, where we unearth the pivotal moments that shaped history. This is the story of how the Berlin Wall fell. A tale of oppression, courage, and a world remade in a single night. To grasp the fall of the Berlin Wall, we must rewind to the ashes of World War II. In 1945, Germany lay in ruins, its cities bombed to rubble, its people starving. The Allies, America, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, had defeated Hitler's Third Reich, but victory bred rivalry. The wartime alliance fractured as the United States and the Soviet Union, now superpowers, eyed each other with suspicion. The Cold War was born, a global standoff between capitalism and communism, democracy and dictatorship. Germany, the heart of the conflict, became its battleground. The Allies divided the country into 4 zones of occupation. The US, Britain, and France controlled the West, while the Soviets took the East. Berlin, deep in Soviet territory, was also split into 4 sectors, a city carved like a pie. By 1949, the division hardened. In the West, the Federal Republic of Germany, West Germany emerged, a democratic state backed by the US and its allies. In the East, the Soviet Union created the German Democratic Republic, GDR, a communist state under Moscow's iron grip. Berlin, though surrounded by East Germany, remained a divided city. West Berlin, a vibrant enclave of freedom, East Berlin, the gray capital of the GDR. The contrast was stark. West Berlin sparkled with Coca-Cola signs, jazz clubs, and rebuilding projects fueled by American aid. East Berlin, under Soviet control, was a world of ration cards, secret police, and propaganda. The Stasi, East Germany's security service, watched every move, their files swelling with reports on neighbors spying on neighbors. By 1961, the divide was more than ideological. It was personal. Families were split, lovers separated, lives torn by an invisible line. The tension boiled over in the 1950s. East Germany's economy faltered under Soviet-style planning, while West Germany's economic miracle lured young, skilled workers. Between 1949 and 1961, 2.7 million East Germans, nearly a sixth of the population, fled to the West, many through Berlin, where crossing was as simple as hopping a subway. This brain drain crippled the GDR, threatening its survival. Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev, furious at the exodus, demanded action. On the night of August 12, 1961, East German leader Walter Ulbricht gave the order. At midnight, soldiers and police rolled out barbed wire across Berlin's streets, sealing the border. Over weeks, the wire became a 96-mile concrete wall, 12 feet high, topped with watchtowers, guard dogs, and machine guns. The Berlin Wall was born, a brutal scar encircling West Berlin, entrapping East Berliners inside. Escape attempts were deadly. At least 140 people died trying to cross, shot by guards or caught in minefields. The wall wasn't just concrete, it was a symbol. To the west, it was the Wall of Shame, proof of communism's failure to win hearts. To the east, it was the anti-fascist protective rampart, a bulwark against capitalist corruption. For Berliners, it was a daily wound. In Bernauer Strasse, apartment buildings straddled the border. Families waved to loved ones across the divide, then watched as windows were bricked up. A young man named Peter Fechter, 18, bled to death in 1962 after being shot trying to climb the wall. His body left in the death strip as West Berliners wept and East German guards stood watch. The wall didn't just divide a city, it split the world, a physical line between two ideologies locked in a global struggle. By the 1980s, the Cold War was a way of life. In West Berlin, American presidents made defiant speeches. John F. Kennedy in 1963 declared, "Ich bin ein Berliner," rallying the free world. Ronald Reagan in 1987 stood at the Brandenburg Gate and demanded, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." East Berliners, meanwhile, lived under the Stasi's shadow. By 1989, the GDR's 91,000 agents and 173,000 informants, nearly 1 in 50 citizens, monitored every whisper of dissent. Yet cracks were forming. The Soviet Union, under Mikhail Gorbachev, was loosening its grip. Gorbachev's reforms, glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring, aimed to save communism by softening it, but they unleashed forces he couldn't control. In Poland and Hungary, communist regimes wobbled as citizens demanded freedom. East Germans watched, their own discontent simmering. Two figures loomed large in this drama. Erich Honecker, the GDR's leader since 1971, was a hardliner who saw the wall as sacred. At 77, he was frail but unyielding, vowing in January 1989 that the wall would stand for another 100 years. His regime crushed protests, jailed dissidents, and rigged elections, like the May 1989 vote, where the government claimed 98.9% support, a lie that sparked outrage. On the other side was the East German people themselves, not a single hero, but a collective force. Pastors like Rainer Eppelmann held secret prayer meetings in Leipzig, where thousands gathered to chant, "Wir sind das Volk," we are the people. Activists like Birbal Boli, a painter, organized underground networks, smuggling dissident writings to the West. By 1989, these sparks of defiance were ready to ignite. The year 1989 was a pressure cooker. In January, Honecker's boast about the wall's permanence rang hollow as East Germans watched their neighbors in Eastern Europe push for change. Hungary, under reformist communists, began dismantling its border fence with Austria in May, creating a loophole for East Germans to flee west. Thousands packed bags, crowding into West German embassies in Budapest, Prague, and Warsaw. By summer, 25,000 East Germans had escaped through Hungary, a hemorrhage the GDR couldn't staunch. In East Germany, protests swelled. In Leipzig, Monday prayer meetings at St. Nicholas Church grew into marches of 70,000 by October, despite police batons and arrests. The Stasi, once omnipotent, couldn't keep up. Gorbachev, visiting Berlin in October for the GDR's 40th anniversary, warned Honecker, "Life punishes those who come too late." Honecker ignored him, but his party was fracturing. On October 18th, the Politburo forced Honecker out, replacing him with Egon Krenz, a 52-year-old loyalist who promised reform but lacked vision. Krenz faced a dilemma. The GDR was bankrupt, its people restless, and Gorbachev had made it clear Soviet tanks wouldn't save him, as they had in 1953's East German uprising. Krenz's team scrambled for a solution. They drafted a new travel policy to ease pressure, allowing limited visits to the West with government approval. It was a half measure, meant to placate without surrendering control, but the plan was rushed, poorly communicated, and handed to the wrong man, Günter Schabowski, the GDR's press chief, who was barely briefed. On November 9th, 1989 at 6 p.m., Schabowski sat before a crowded press conference in East Berlin, televised live to a nation on edge. A reporter asked about the new travel rules. Schabowski, flustered and rifling through notes, mumbled that East Germans could apply for visas to travel abroad, including to West Germany. Then came the bombshell. When pressed on when this would take effect, he shrugged and said, "As far as I know, effective immediately, without delay." The room froze. Reporters gasped. Schabowski, unaware of the chaos he'd unleashed, ended the conference and left. He hadn't meant to open the border. The policy was supposed to involve strict visa checks, but his words, broadcast to millions, were taken as gospel. East Berliners didn't wait for clarification. By 7 p.m., crowds gathered at border checkpoints like Bornholmerstrasse and Invalidenstrasse, demanding to cross. Border guards trained to shoot escapees had no orders. Their radios crackled with confusion as commanders scrambled. Harold Jaeger, a 46-year-old lieutenant colonel at Bornholmerstrasse, faced a swelling crowd of thousands chanting, "Open the gate!" Jaeger, a loyal officer for 25 years, called his superiors repeatedly, getting no clear instructions. By 10:30 p.m., the crowd was a sea of faces. Young couples, families, students, all pressing against the barriers. Jaeger, fearing a stampede, made a snap decision. At 11:30 p.m., he ordered the gates opened. The crowd surged forward, cheering, crying, embracing strangers. West Berliners, hearing the news, rushed to the wall, climbing its graffiti-covered slabs to greet their Eastern kin. The scene was pandemonium and joy. At Checkpoint Charlie, iconic for its Cold War standoffs, East Germans poured into West Berlin, some still in slippers, clutching nothing but hope. Bars handed out free beer, strangers danced in the streets. Aussies, East Germans, marveled at West Berlin's lights, its stock shops, its freedom. Wesses, West Berliners, wept as they hugged cousins and friends unseen for decades. By dawn, the wall was a carnival of reunion, its concrete slabs dwarfed by human will. Some grabbed hammers and chisels, hacking at the wall, Mauerspekte, or wall peckers, chipping away at history. The world watched, stunned, as television beamed images of a divided city knitting itself back together. The fall of the Berlin Wall on November 9, 1989, was not the end of the story, but the start of a new chapter. East Germany's regime, already crumbling, collapsed entirely. Egon Krenz resigned in December, and the Communist Party dissolved. On October 3, 1990, East and West Germany reunited as the Federal Republic of Germany, absorbing the GDR's 16 million people into a democratic state. The wall, once a fortress, was dismantled piece by piece. Some slabs sold as souvenirs, others ground into dust for roads. Berlin, scarred but whole, began rebuilding as Germany's capital. Its Brandenburg Gate no longer a gate to nowhere, but a symbol of unity. The human cost of division lingered. Families like the Schultzes, split since 1961, reunited tearfully, but decades apart left gaps no embrace could fill. A mother from East Berlin, separated from her son who'd fled west at 15, found him in 1989, now a stranger with a West German wife and children. Others bore deeper wounds, the families of the 140 wall victims, like Peter Fechter, mourned loved ones lost to a regime's paranoia. Yet stories of resilience emerged. A Leipzig pastor, Christian Führer, whose church sparked the 1989 protests, saw his prayers for peace answered. A young East German student, Angela Merkel, crossed the wall that night, later becoming Germany's first chancellor from the former East, a quiet testament to the era's transformation. The wall's fall reshaped the world. Eastern Europe's communist dominoes fell. Czechoslovakia's Velvet Revolution toppled its regime in weeks. Romania's dictator Nicolae Ceausescu was executed by Christmas. In 1991, the Soviet Union itself dissolved, ending the Cold War. Germany's reunification, costing over $2 trillion, was no fairy tale. East Germans faced unemployment as Soviet-era factories closed. Many felt like second-class citizens in the new Germany, a sentiment dubbed Ostalgie, nostalgia for the East's simplicity. West Germans grumbled at taxes funding reconstruction. Yet the economic gap narrowed. By 2025, Eastern Germany's GDP per capita reached 80% of the West's, and Berlin became a global hub of tech and culture. The wall's legacy endures. Its fragments, scattered in museums from Washington to Cape Town, remind us of division's cost. In Berlin, a 1.3-kilometer stretch remains as the East Side Gallery, its murals a canvas of hope. The fall also left warnings. Hasty unification strained Germany's social fabric, and rising nationalism in Europe today echoes old divides. Brexit, trade wars, and border disputes in places like Ukraine show walls, physical or not, persist. The fall of the Berlin Wall was a triumph of human spirit, but it asked a question that lingers. Can unity ever be complete when scars run so deep? Was the wall's fall an inevitable tide of freedom or a fragile moment that could have gone another way? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this dive into Berlin's reunion moved you, hit that like button, subscribe to Vestige Files, and ring the bell for more stories of history's turning points.